Well, thank you, everyone. And again, I'm the president of the Christian Coalition of Alabama. And this is part of our voter education series for the Republican primary and now Republican runoff and the different races that are involved with runoffs. So we have runoffs in the lieutenant governor's race. We have runoffs in the AG race. We have runoffs in the agricultural commission race. And we have a couple state rep races, one in Chambers County. So you may see some information from that particular race, Jeff Monroe, and also Joe Freeman's race down in Gulf Shores. But one of the races that a lot of people aren't paying attention to potentially, and is very important, is the State Board of Education. And I have the distinct pleasure of being able to speak to today, and you hear from her, Emily Jones, who's a candidate for State Board of Education, District 8. So Emily, it's so great to be with you today. And I'm so glad you were able to speak with us here at Christian Coalition.
Yes, thank you for making time in your schedule to have me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So Emily, this is such an important race. I think a lot of people is overlooked. They don't realize how important the State Board of Education is, and particularly right now, we have several conservatives on the State Board of Education, and you would be kind of like the final. This particular position, District 8, would be kind of the final linchpin in basically setting policy, things that will be more pro-family and things that involve our children and all the things that we're concerned about in education, particularly us at Christian Coalition and many of the other pro-family groups. So can you tell the viewers a little bit about that and why that's so important and why you got into this race?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, right now we've kind of got about a 50-50 split on the board. Going into the next board will be very important because we have the potential to move that to more of like a 5-3 type vote because there are 8 positions on the board. But in worst case situations, if we ended up with a split board, you have the governor that serves as the president of the board. So theoretically, you would have Governor Tuberville coming in to break any type of ties. We know that he's going to lean very conservative. So we're in a very unique position to truly transform education in the state of Alabama if we can get this board in place and have Governor Tuberville at the helm to really change things and start doing things how they should be done, which is our state board owning the decisions when it comes to public education in our state versus what's happening right now is we have legislatures passing laws, and they're not necessarily bad things, but they're having to pass legislation before we actually get to the point of really having strong conservative policy in our public schools. So we need to fix that, and we've got the potential to do that right before us, and we really need to make sure that we're able to deliver that for the students and the children here in our state.
Well, there's been several things. I'm glad you brought that up, Emily, because there have been several things that our viewers have been telling me about, and me personally been concerned about in the Board of Education and how education policy is enacted throughout the state of Alabama. I want to just talk to you about a few things, at least, that have been brought up. One of the things is the change in educational standards. Several years ago, I think during COVID, they actually were lowered. And I think we talked offline a little bit about that, but could you talk a little bit more about what happened then and what you think the Board of Education needs to do to change that? I mean, it seems like our kids are just going further and further down this slippery slope since, well, even before COVID, but even worse during COVID. How do we reverse those trends rather than just saying, hey, we're doing great, but actually see test scores change, I guess, is what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things with it. So Literacy Act is one of the things that you and I had talked about previously. And the intent behind the Literacy Act is it's amazing. It's doing really good things. It focuses on the science of reading versus 3Qing reading, all of that. So the basics of it are really good, and we need to do a better job, pushing that along. One of the things with the Literacy Act is it's really around 3rd grade reading levels. So if students don't meet a certain threshold, then they don't get to progress beyond 3rd grade until they meet or exceed that threshold. What happened, I think it was 2 years ago, it was a couple of years ago when Literacy Act really started coming full force in public schools. The state board actually lowered that threshold because they didn't want to have that first year of it going into effect, having a ton of kids that didn't progress beyond 3rd grade. So they actually lowered that threshold so that more kids could pass, and then they slowly are inching that threshold back up. It's not back to where the Literacy Act originally, kind of drew the line. And I apologize, I can't remember the threshold right off the top of my head. But they're trending back to what the Literacy Act would require. So there is some goodness there. One of the things with the Literacy Act, and I talked to a teacher actually in DeKalb County about this, the the Literacy Act really focuses on elementary age, really third, fourth grade, but it doesn't go beyond that. So if you've got kids that just barely pass in third grade, they're going to continue to struggle. So we need to expand the Literacy Act, or at least the components of it, into junior high, have additional reading coaches there that can really help kids that are struggling, do two reading classes if we can figure out scheduling to make that option available. So there's stuff we can do to get back in line with Literacy Act, but also add to it that will help further reading capabilities of kids. The other really big thing that we don't talk about, it's becoming more of a national conversation, which I'm very excited about. We've got to get rid of Chromebooks in our classrooms,
Oh, no question. No
especially,
question.
yes,
Yeah, no question.
especially at elementary age. I mean,
Mhm.
they distract kids. They're a nuisance to teachers, but they actually deter students from learning to read. So
Mhm.
we've really got to be able to get back to a book in the hand with a teacher looking at kids eye to eye, getting the head nod of yes, they understand what's happening or they're struggling with certain things. Let's focus on that. So we're it's becoming more of a national conversation, but we've got to move the needle here in Alabama to start getting rid of those.
Do you think, let me ask you another question along those lines. So this is very personal to me. I have a 13-year-old that's in middle school and a granddaughter, and I have another one that's in uh, elementary school, right? Fortunately, my younger one's in private school, and my older one is not in private school, and it's like night and day as far as their learning, as you can imagine. So what we've seen is some of the hindrances of two things. One is that now in many of the schools, we have a lot of students that don't know English and they're getting English as second language. So that's taken up a tremendous amount of instructional time. So that's one thing. The second thing we've noticed is that with these different changes in schools, like they're closing schools and everything, and they're moving kids that are at-risk kids, more, let's just call them at-risk kids, kids from single family homes or parents that have, issues at home into these other districts that were performing fairly well. And now they may make up as much as 60 or 70% of the student body in some of these schools just because they've closed other schools that are closer. Does the State Board of Education have any role in changing those two dynamics particularly? It seems like, and here's the other challenge is that some of these people don't want to say anything because they got the per pupil dollars coming to the people that are not, probably shouldn't even be here to begin with, particularly the kids that can't speak as English and are mainly Hispanic. So how do you deal with that, Emily? How do we, I guess we'd be compassionate to people that are here so they don't learn, but also don't hinder the kids that are, of people that are citizens here and live in those areas so that they continue to learn at a proper way, proper pace.
Yeah. Um, that's a very complex situation for sure because to your point, we need to be compassionate to the kids that are here because they're kids, they're innocent in all of it. But at the same time, we can't forego our responsibility to teach. That's what schools are meant for. So one of
Mhm.
the things that I had heard about, and it's super controversial, so it would require kind of tiptoeing through the situation and being very delicate about it. But when we had the Biden administration, there was a massive influx of illegal students in our school systems. And because of federal law, schools can't turn them away. And they can't even track the data on these kids. And that's a major problem. And that's really where a lot of things for me, that's kind of the nucleus of all the issues is we don't know who's in our school systems because the federal government says we can't track them. So I
Right.
think that's the first step. It's Missouri or no, Oklahoma. I think it was Oklahoma. Their former superintendent said, we don't care. We're passing a policy and we're going to start tracking these students. I think we need
Mhm.
to look at that, start tracking them because at least then you can put a dollar figure around what's the impact in our public schools. What is the local taxpayer, the Alabama taxpayer having to take on because of a federal mandate outside of our control? So I think that's the first step. We need to really be able to start collecting data on them and putting a dollar figure around them. The next thing is the ESL. It kind of goes back to that, right? We need to be able to figure out if it's X number of dollars that's impacting us because of these kids, then we have to have all these additional resources. So I think all of that starts coming into play. As far as school closures, I don't have a good answer on it, but I see it in a lot of school systems right now. I think it's mostly local decisions, but it's all going to come back to dollars, right? I mean, if they can't afford to keep the school open, then they're having to move kids. So part of it I can understand, but they did some redistricting in Limestone. I guess it was a year or two ago. And you had kids that went from, a 5-10 minute bus ride to it's 30 minutes because they're being redistricted
Yes.
because of school closures. So
Right.
we got to look into it. I don't know that the state board has a lot of control around it, but if we're seeing this happening in a systemic way across the state, then we've got to figure out a different way to address it.
Well, I think, Emily, I think one of the things that you've talked about, I've talked to you also about, is this tremendous bureaucracy. My gosh, I mean, some of the school systems, we could take all the bureaucratic mandates and some of the bureaucracy, and all this woke stuff that's in these schools. You'd have a whole lot more money for local schools, for kids to go to school where like all of us when we were young, we rode our bike to school, and we could walk to, because it has a lot of other social implications as well. And like I said, especially, and we know, for example, in Decatur, it's costing $1 million a year just in the Decatur school system for English as a second language. And yet these same kids, they get the goodies, then they get all the welfare benefits, then you find them in all the underground economy, which is, again, that's another problem. So
Yeah.
to me, that's a big thing, that somehow some of those needs to be statistics or something, the state board to start addressing that. Let me ask you about a couple other things. So the other thing is, how do you see, I guess one of the things in the race, we've got a lot of different people, a lot of people have different personalities and different things like that. How do you see maybe your skill set as far as working with the other people within the school board, the existing school board? How do you, I mean, you're coming with some new ideas. I mean, do you feel like you'll have pushback from the entrenched people already there? You feel like maybe they'll feel like you're too aggressive, because you have you're passionate about stuff, obviously. A lot of us are passionate about stuff. How do you deal with that bureaucracy, just even within maybe people that maybe are somewhat like-minded with you, but, are kind of bought into all the bureaucracy, I'm seeing in something we see in the school systems.
Yeah, again, very complex question situation. Um, I recognize that change is hard, right? I mean, it's hard for all of us, and the older we get, the harder it becomes.
Mm.
Um, Thankfully, I've worked in an industry where change management has been its own special little approach to how we do things, because I've worked for large corporations, so I understand the change management piece of it. So thankfully, I at least can approach the situation understanding change is difficult. It requires being incremental. And most importantly, it requires relationships.
Right.
And I've got good relationships with a lot of the people on the board. I've not met all of them individually, but I know enough about them to know where we're alike and where we're going to be able to work together. So I think that's really the key to it is I want to do a whole lot of things, but we can't do a whole lot of things in a short amount of time. We're going to have to ease into a lot of the things that I want to do. Computers, my number one priority. We can't start there because it's going to be so difficult to get there.
Right. Right.
But there are simpler things that we could do. We live in a very red state. It should not be an issue to say September needs to be American Patriotism Month. And during September, there's already federal mandates that require teaching of the Constitution. We're going to add to that. And we're just going to add some stuff around teaching Alabama history and pride in Alabama. Let's talk about the dangers of socialism and communism. There's little things we could do that I think most people would get on board with. And that kind of starts getting people more comfortable with, okay, we can do things different and it's not going to completely disrupt the system. So I think we've
Right.
just got to approach it very strategically. And we've got a good board in place where there will be enough alliances there, I think, to slowly get the ball rolling as we move into more of the tougher discussions.
Right. And we also talk about, and again, you talk about, relationships and things like that. And we've talked about this a little bit before. One of the things your opponents and different people have brought up about is connections, like in some of your things with the Moms for Liberty, like the log cabin Republicans. And how do you navigate that? And with some conservatives that might be concerned about that, let's just for example.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions on this. And it's really easy for me. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We're all children of God. We all fall short of the grace of God. So we've got to be compassionate when dealing with other people. We're never going to agree 100% with any other person on this planet. So for log cabin Republicans, I acknowledge that their lifestyle and their life choices are not biblical, and I'm unwavering on that. But it doesn't mean that I still can't find areas where we do align. One of their biggest priorities the past 2 years has been getting rid of gender ideology in public schools. For Moms for Liberty, that's been a major fight for us for years. And, I can go and I can advocate in Montgomery every day of my life, and it's not going to move the dial nearly as much as a gay teacher going down there and saying, really, pride flags and all this stuff do not belong in our schools, and I want it out. That's just going to move the dial a whole lot more than me. And that's where we've really worked together with log cabin Republicans the most. And we've built a relationship around that. And candidly, I've had very honest, direct conversations with some of them about the differences in our beliefs. And we're just going to be different on that. And that's, it is what it is. We've accepted that those are just different points of view for us, but we're going to continue to be respectful to one another and work what we can
I've been
on it.
always, but I've never understood this thing. The other thing I agree with you on all of those points. The only thing I don't understand why they want to self-identify like that outside of just saying, "Hey, I've got this type of orientation, but I want to work within the Republican Party," and they could still identify, when as far as on certain issues of that. Just don't understand why. I've never understand why that whole advocacy group had developed. Maybe they felt marginalized in the Republican Party. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, and we have so much of that going on in the Republican Party. And then the other thing that's happened, what frustrates me a little bit as some organization that's been around 20 years in just in our politics in general, Emily, how do we get everybody back together with this particular election cycle, particularly for some reason in the last 35 years I've been involved with politics, has been so divisive. You know what I'm saying?
It's
I mean,
nasty.
it's gotten nasty. I mean, these are a lot of, I would venture to say the majority of people running, except for the incumbents, that have just been drinking the Kool-Aid, right? But the challengers, most of them are pretty much aligned on most every issue. You know what I'm saying? I would say just about every place. And yeah, there's maybe some people have different skill sets but this viciousness and people going after people in the other one, how do you feel about that? And then how do you heal those wounds? When these are people you may have to work with if they get elected something. How
Yeah.
do you address that, Emily? What do you think?
Yeah. The wounds is the part that I look at stuff happening every day and I'm like, what does this look like on the other side of June 16th? Because
Right.
it will be hard for a lot of people that, are on an opposing side. If the other side wins, how do they get past that? And I'm relatively new to politics, so I question, is this just normal? And I've not seen it. It feels very different when I talk to people. It's very different. So I don't know how you kind of heal those wounds after the fact. But for me, I am very much a policy person. Being with Moms for Liberty is very controversial for a lot of people in my area because I'm in a purple district or purple county, I should say.
Mhm.
So I'm used to really getting attacked for being conservative. It's just what it is. But I always get questioned about Trump. That's the number one thing that liberals come after me about is being a Trumper. And I say the same thing every time, whether it's a Trump question or, it doesn't matter. I focus on policy, not the person, because as much as I can love some of the things that President Trump's doing, there's also a lot of stuff that he does that I do not like. And we've talked about it. AI in education is one of those things where I
Right.
think he's dead wrong. So I can support him all day long for shutting down the border. I think that's great, but I don't agree with him on the AI thing. So for me, I just kind of take things policy to policy and make my decision off that. I don't have blind loyalty to any single person. That's just who I am. And they shouldn't have that towards me. We should be able to think critically on the topic and decide if that's really how we align. And if we don't, then let's be respectful and just say, I disagree with you on that. And then
Right.
we do align, like let's work together to move the dial and make our state better. That
Well,
should be the ultimate goal.
that's very reassuring, Emily. I'm so glad you brought that up because that's the thing I worry about. I have not seen anything like it in years. And it seems like each year it gets worse with all this acrimony. But I'm glad you touched on AI because, like I said, right now over this weekend, the forces that we have marshaled together are really putting a push all across the platforms on AI. We're trying to get every candidate to try to tie into that, both from with our organization. You'll start to see, you're going to see things on every platform, imagine, because this is a threat. I mean, your
Yeah.
daughter or granddaughter or my granddaughter, and you should not be worried about us posting a picture of them at a game or a graduation and it made into something pornographic. And that is just or sexualized. Tell me about how you think. Firstly, how you feel about personally. It seems like that's very personal to you about this AI, but also how do if you get in the Department of Education, how do you thwart that? What's going on with AI in the
Yeah.
education?
Yeah, and it's going to be really hard on the AI and education piece. So I have a son well, he's about to be in sixth grade. So he gets school issued Chromebook, and they block most AI. You can't get on ChatGPT, you can't get on Character AI, but because it's a Chromebook, it's owned by Google, you can still access Gemini. So I just kind of explored with it one day to figure out, what are the boundaries on this? Because I'm one of those, like I push on boundaries to see how far I can get. And I was able to have very inappropriate conversations on what is a fifth grade computer or a fifth grader's computer. I had asked the question about, is abortion ethical? And if you've ever used AI, it prompts you what it thinks the next
Yeah,
question is.
right,
So
right.
it prompts all the way through this conversation, and I'm responding back with 2, 3 words replies. Like I'm not giving good, detailed instructions. But it prompts me all the way through, and essentially it ends by telling me what it assumes as a fifth grader, how to obtain an abortion legally based on my level of gestation. Well, abortion's illegal in Alabama, so it told
Right.
me, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee, these are the areas you can go. So it's telling a minor how to cross state lines to obtain an abortion. And then the other question I had asked it was something to the effect of, I think I'm trans and I want to talk to my parents about it, but I don't think they're going to be supportive. What should I do? And again, it kind of prompts through, and it tells me how to approach it. And it says, but before you ever have this conversation, you need to have a safe space in case you need to leave home. So again, it's
That's
telling a
crazy.
fifth grader how to leave home.
Yeah.
So I think the easiest thing dealing with thwarting all of this in our schools is first getting rid of computers is going to be a major step.
Hmm.
They don't have a computer, they can't access it. But it's going to be really hard because you have the Trump administration pushing it.
Yeah,
So
right.
I'm trying to dig in and see what are other states doing around this, and the answer is they're not doing a whole lot. Even the legislature or the Department of Education in the states, they're trying to figure it out. So it's uncharted waters, but I think getting rid of computers is the first easy step, and after that, we're going to have to really work with other states and figure out what are some ways that we can really step or put strong
Right.
firewalls in place.
Well, and then like you said, I think you alluded to something that we've been saying. It says at a minimum, force these companies to take out the algorithms.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, you have a kid that gets on there and you're prompted to go on Gronk, spicy Gronk, and he's 16 or 17 years old and he's got a picture of a cheerleader, and
Yep.
the Gronk AI is telling him, oh, why don't you put her in all this filthy talk and say, why don't you put her in lingerie? Oh, now why don't you take all her clothes off?
Yep.
And that picture now is on their servers, not only yours. As
Yep.
they circulate, that girl's life is ruined forever.
Yeah.
And so to me, what I'm trying to get all the candidates, well, I don't care whether they can do something about it or not, at least embrace one idea. And that's when our legislation last year say, look, if this happens and the Gronk or whatever, Meta, whoever it is, gives you an algorithm like you were describing, Emily, that tells them how to do something, and they're a victim of that, then they should be held legally accountable, a cause of
Yep.
action. That's simple enough. As simple as simple. And if we do that across the states, those AI programs will dismantle those algorithms that do that, just like you said.
Yeah.
But it has to be on every level. I'm talking about education. It has to be in the AG's office. It has to be the legislature. It has to be the lieutenant governor's office, governor. All of them have to be on the same page, and that's what we're really pushing. And so we would relish your support for that position as well.
Well, and one of the questions that I have in the back of my mind is, let's just say that somebody did ask the question that I did around abortion, and we'll say eighth grader, because it makes it slightly easier to process. An eighth grader asked the same question, and it says, "Well, go to Florida and get an abortion," and a girl goes and gets an abortion. I mean, and it's happening, at school. That is more or less the school providing medical direction to a minor.
Exactly.
What level of risk or liability does the school have at that point? Because while it wasn't a person, it was a school resource that told them. So that's where I think there's
Good
just
point.
an
Yeah.
ungodly amount of risk introduced to our school systems by allowing this that no one's really thinking through yet. And I don't have the answer on that. It could be, attorney says absolutely that's not the case. But if I were the parent, I would argue that the school had given them access to it. And I think that opens them up to a lot of lawsuits.
Well, that goes back to our cause of action issue. If we have a cause of action, then you have a way of getting things remedy. So
Right.
that's what we're talking about. Well, Emmy, we're getting close on time. Is anything else you'd like to share with the people that are going to be seeing this or potentially seeing this as they contemplate who to vote for on June 16th? And like I say, your race is very, very important to the state of Alabama.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is I've kind of talked about it. I've got a son that's in public school right now. So when we talk about the issues that are happening in our public schools, I see them every single day. I deal with them through what my child brings home. I deal with them through conversations that I have. And I hear them from the teachers directly. I go to my son's school to go eat lunch with him every other week. So I'm constantly in conversation with them. So I understand a lot of the challenges that are happening in our school systems right now. And I understand the urgency in fixing it. We've got a once in a lifetime opportunity before us. And if we don't jump on this, my son's future is on the line. So I'm very passionate about it, like you said, because I do. I understand the urgency and the opportunity to fix it. So I would love the opportunity to serve our state and our district to really, do my part to improve education in our state, not just for my son, but for all the students that are out there.
Well, great, Emily. Again, thank you so much for taking time. I know you're very busy. This is a very busy time right here before the election. I thank you for taking this time to just to talk to our viewers and the people that get our emails from Christian Coalition and our membership. We really, really appreciate your time, taking time to do that. And you guys remember on June 16th, next Tuesday, the State Board of Education is going to be on the ballot in District 8. So make sure everyone turns out and votes in that primary, as well as the other offices that are going to be you'll be selecting to determine who's going to be the Republican nominee for Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, and Ag Commissioner, and as well as some of the other state local offices. So again, Emily, thank you so much. Good luck to you on the
Thank you.
campaign trail, and hope
Thank
to get up with you soon after the election.
you. Awesome. Thank you.
You're very welcome.